The problem with hourly billing is the better you get at something, the faster it becomes. So editing a video for me around 10 years ago might take an entire week. Now, having all the experiences might only take me a day. So with hourly billing or day rates, I'm losing money as I'm getting better. Does that make sense? Welcome to the EuCan podcast. In this podcast, we try to inspire your mindset to change from you can't to you can. In this episode, we're going to be talking about pricing and negotiations. We have Kitty with us today, and she'll be asking some questions midway and maybe doing a little bit of a role play between a client and a vendor towards the end. Say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kitty.
Okay, so the first thing we have to talk about is the difference between cost, price, and value. A client will often ask you, hey, how much does a project like this cost? When they actually mean how much is your price. So here's the difference. Cost is the actual monetary amount that it'll cost you to make this project happen. For example, for a video production, it'll be the salary of crew members, crew meals, as well as the equipment rental and the hours of editing, for example. The price is the markup on top of that, the margins that you make. And then we have value. Value is the amount of, it could be financial, it could be a branding value that you give to your client. So in my example, for example, if the video costs $50,000, you might price it up to be $100,000. And then the value that you bring to your client might be over $500,000, right? So if you shoot an ad that's $100,000 in price, then you might generate $500,000 in value. That's what I mean. So it's very important that you clarify internally to yourself the difference between all three terms. One of the mistakes that, well, not mistake, a very common way of pricing is hourly billing. So you, as a beginning filmmaker, as a recording artist, you might charge, let's say, $100 per hour. The problem with hourly billing is the better you get at something, the faster it becomes. So editing a video for me around 10 years ago might take an entire week. Now, having all the experiences might only take me a day. So with hourly billing or day rates, I'm losing money as I'm getting better. Does that make sense? So that's why as you progress, as you get more experienced, you should stop charging hourly. In the beginning, it's okay to charge hourly because it might take you more time and you're protecting yourself by doing hourly pricing. But as you get better, you should stop hourly pricing because it's going to take you less time to do it. And here's the thing, with a lot of important clients, time is valuable, time is money. And they don't realize that sometimes. They might ask, wow, it's only going to take you a day and you're charging X amount of dollars? Well, would you rather I charge you for 10x the amount of time, but still get it done in a day? What I'm saying is, it might take you much less time, and that's actually beneficial to the client because you can get it done much faster at a higher quality. And sometimes you have to make your client realize that it's not about the amount of time it takes for me to do it. If you save time, you save money. And if you can manage at the same quality or even better, then there's no reasonable objection that your client can make in that sense. So what do you do after hourly billing? How do you change your pricing? You move on to value-based pricing. And this is essentially understanding that you're not selling what you make. You're not selling the process. You're selling the value you bring to your clients. So in the earlier example, the value I mentioned was $500,000 in sale. That's the value you bring. Here's what I mean. Your client, to some extent, they don't really care about what camera you're using, what mic you're using, how many hours you're spending on it. They care that you deliver results, and specifically that these results can gain them the value that they're looking for, obtain their objectives. So it's important in the beginning to define the scope, define the objective. A lot of new filmmakers, they'll get approached for a job. Hey, can you film this project? They'll be, yeah, I can film it. You don't even ask why. You just say yes. So you're not understanding what it is they're looking for. I'm going to give you an example here of how we took a project that was initially budgeted for $50,000 and negotiated it to $250,000, so 5x in budget. The client came to us with a tour video in mind. They wanted to shoot a walking tour. A person's walking around the office, introducing the office. And the first question you should ask is, why? Why are you doing this project? Why are we filming a walking tour all of a sudden? And as you discover, this is called a discovery phase, a strategy phase. You ask them why. What's the point of this? And we discovered that it wasn't really the office they wanted to show off. They wanted to show off different solutions, different products that they have. So, and their solutions are digital, so it's not physical. So then we realized, okay, you don't really need an office tour. What you need is an online catalog of videos that are easily accessible, organized, and we created sort of an interactive experience for them with videos. And that's how we managed to charge $250,000, 5 times the original amount.
I have a quick question here. So I really like the idea of this cost price value-based pricing, but let's say the client doesn't actually know what the specific value is. Your example was $500,000, but how do you know exactly what it's worth, right? Especially if it's not something like I'm making a video that would directly impact sales. What if it's an indirect way to help them generate revenue? How do you actually identify the real value for the client?
Right. So discovering the real value for the client is a very important step, and I think we can talk about it on an entire episode. But generally, you have to ask very specific questions, and as a vendor, you have to know your client as well. So always start with why. Why are you doing this project? They might say, "Oh, we're just doing it for branding and marketing." So this is a little bit harder, right? They don't have an exact sales number. Okay, you want branding and marketing. How many people do you want to reach? I want to reach maybe 1,000 people. Okay, 1,000 people. And how many do you think will convert? Normally, the percentage is around 10% conversion. 5-10% conversion is pretty good. So 5-10% of 1,000, just 50, 100 people. And how much are they going to spend? And they might spend $100,000 total. Then you're sort of closely segueing to how much the audience is worth in that case. Of course, sometimes it's literally just a branding purpose where it's the image. Then you can talk about how important this image is. For example, if I am a graphic designer, I make a logo, okay? I'll say it's a $50,000 logo for a Nike check, right? It's such a simple check, $50,000. You as a client might say,
That's so expensive.
right, okay, so it's an expensive logo, but can I ask you what you're doing with this logo? Are you going to
Putting it on everything that we sell.
So you're putting it on T-shirts, billboards, business cards, shoes, right? So if this logo doesn't work out and you've already printed everything and you put on billboards, how much money did you just waste? More than $50,000 in printing it, recalling it, your overall image. It's hard to put a number on that, but as you sort of explain to your client how impactful this project is, they'll understand. Does that clarify your question? Okay. So, so with the story where we talked about how we changed from raised a budget from $50,000 to $250,000, it's about really understanding the problem and trying to give your client as much value as possible. It's not about being greedy at this point. Because if I was greedy, if the company was greedy, you could have easily said, yeah, okay, I'll take the $15,000, do the walking tour, because actually that's a much simpler project. The margins are better. I could have said, yeah, let's do the walking tour. Let's just walk around, set up a few lights, and do a walking tour. Easy. But I'm not helping them solve a problem. I'm not helping them with their pain point. You have to find their pain point and help them. And that's how you maintain a long-term client relationship. Because for me at this stage, just a monetary reward from a project is not really enough for me. I need to see the results. I need to see the impact it has for the client. If it's not making an impact, regardless of how much we're getting paid, I'm not really satisfied. Because I feel like we're just making disposable projects. It's not meaningful. It's not making an impact. So that's really important to me and the client. And once you realize that, I think that's a big turning point. Okay, so now that we've mentioned the whole value-based pricing just a little bit, we haven't really dug too deep. An important part in the beginning is called diagnosis. And I mentioned it briefly just now, where you don't just take whatever your client is coming to you at face value. You have to sort of dive deeper into their why, their what, and their how. For example, if we look at a doctor, if you go into a doctor, go into a clinic, and you see a doctor, hey doc, I'm feeling a little bit out of shape. I think I'm having a fever. Oh, you should just take some Panadol. Yeah. How would you feel? He didn't even ask you about your other symptoms. He just prescribed you something on the spot. It might solve the problem temporarily, but you might have a deeper underlying problem that he's not diagnosing or not really treating. So a proper doctor would actually ask you a series of questions to determine the source of the problem and how it can be treated. So that's very important as a creative person for you to diagnose. Even if you're doing, let's say, something simple as event coverage, event videography, you might ask, how do you want your audience to feel? Why are you making this event video? Is it for your next event? Are you trying to promote the next event? How would you want your next event to be different from the current event? Maybe we can do something a little bit different with this highlight video to get you there. See, you're going beyond what you make. You're finding out how you can make your clients' lives better. So don't be selfish. Think about your client first. Once we have the diagnosis, we can talk a little bit about pricing in general. There's a theory called pricing anchor. With this theory, you have to say the number first. A client might ask, what's your budget? And I'll say, we begin at around $65,000. Now, if the client was thinking about $20,000, they're like, oh no. They're going to think I'm so cheap. I only have $20,000. Okay, I can't say $20,000. Okay, maybe I'll push the budget a little bit, $45,000. But to do price anchoring, you have to be familiar with your industry, right? Because if you're not familiar and you anchor a really low number, oh, we begin at $10,000, and the client was expecting to give you $40,000. They might not think you're a bargain. They might think, oh no, this guy's an amateur. He doesn't know what he's doing. So anchoring is for those who are intermediate or on the higher end of experience.
So would you suggest that beginners, if you're a new film production company, then you don't do anchoring and you wait for the client to start off first and give you the price?
I think in the very, very beginning, you would still benefit from hourly pricing. And with hourly pricing, you still need a price, right? I would do a bit of research, see what the market price is, and then anchor around there. Because anchoring takes a little bit more finesse of a skill, but you'll notice that I said we start at around $60,000. So it's 65K and up. So I'm not limiting to 65K. So it might be 125K. It just begins at 65K depending on what it is. So I would recommend for beginners, get a little bit more experience first before you try anchoring. And then once you sort of interact with enough clients, with enough people in the industry, then you'll know approximately how much you're worth or how much other people are charging, so you can charge more than those if you believe that you can create more value than others. Yeah. So value-based anchoring, you anchor with a price so that in their mind, they're stuck with like a particular price, like $65,000, no longer thinking about $20,000. And the anchoring effect is a very psychological tool that you can use. Then you can use what's called bracketing, and you can combine both price anchoring and price bracketing. This is for it's for clients who don't really have a budget. They don't have a specific budget in mind, but you know the general range. You want to gauge the general range. So you might say something like, based on what you told me, we're expecting on the high end maybe $200,000 and maybe on the low end $100,000. So you have a huge gap, and they should fit somewhere in between that range. And if they don't, you can let them go. But essentially with price bracketing, you're not letting the client get away with not answering a budget, but still anchoring. And you're keeping your doors relatively open if you don't want to be too fixated on one price, if you're afraid of letting a client go. And another thing I wanted to talk about was sometimes when you're working with smaller companies, if you're not working for the huge multi-million international companies, they might not have the money. They might actually be broke or not have budget to make a video. But like I said, you're there to help them create value, not so much to squeeze every penny out of them. So what can you do when the client says, when I anchor $50,000 and they actually only have $28,000? Well, let's say they're a drinks company, a beer company. You might ask, hey, our pantry needs drinks. Would you be able to maybe provide us on a monthly subscription of free drinks until we reach the amount difference between $20,000 and $50,000? It's cheaper for them, but you're still gaining that value. And I think it also creates a great client relationship when you're drinking or consuming their products because you believe in it. So it's not always about the money. It can be about trading in their products, maybe shares within the company if it's very new, or even coupons. Sometimes we might film with hotels. They don't have the biggest budgets. But what they will offer is our free accommodation. So I can book them out anytime and they'll give me a free suite or a suite upgrade at no additional cost and a better treatment, etc. But it's about figuring out how to gain value and give value on an equivalent level without involving money sometimes when they don't have that actual budget. Finally, some mistakes that a lot of people make in pricing, in figuring out that number that they give to a client is, especially in the film industry, not including their equipment rental. A lot of filmmakers will own their own cameras and lenses, maybe even lights. What you should do is charge for rental as well. And you might say, hey, I don't want to cheat my client. I own the equipment. I'm not paying rental. Yes, you own the equipment, but you had to pay for it. And what happens if it breaks? Who's paying for that? Who's paying for repairment? You can charge them a rental for your equipment at a discounted rate, but it's important that you do charge it because someone has to pay for it. Not you. This is not a passion. This is a business. So it's important that you charge that. Do you have any questions so far?
Yes, I actually really love that hotel example because when you were talking about when the client doesn't have money, what else can you give? I wrote down here, hotel, get room. But actually, on that, I thought about, let's say, I think the drinks company and hotel was a really good example, but what if the client's product or service is not something that they can offer you?
Can you give me an example? A company that has nothing to offer, then that's not really a company, right?
Like it's more of a service organization that their product or service is not something that they can give to you so readily. Like like for instance, if your company is really just not in their target market, it's just not very applicable for you. Then let's say apart from getting their product or service, what else could you
You might
get
not
us
need
some
it.
money?
You might not need it, but maybe your team does. Maybe your friends or family does. Maybe, I mean, an example that I heard was you might be filming for a band that has no money at all. You film it for free, but maybe your cousin really likes that band. You just hate it, and now the band owes you a favor to perform at his or her birthday party. Or do you have any other examples you want to challenge me
I was
with?
thinking of a consulting organization.
So consulting
pro bono.
is great because if we film for a consulting company, like say their corporate video, then they can consult us on our business, give us a third perspective, and help us. Consulting is so diverse and
Yeah, it
so
is.
universal. I don't think that's an issue. I mean, let's say one of the person who is mixing this podcast, Isaac. Sometimes he might not have that much budget to help us to pay us for his videos, but he will make up for it. And this is like an unspoken thing, but he'll make up for it by helping us mix and record, mix and master the podcast audio for this episode, or he'll find some other way to sort of help us because it goes again beyond the monetary value. And we don't do much in the music industry, so Isaac can't really help us. We don't make music. But you'll never know. Sometimes it overlaps. I'm trying to think of other companies that might be difficult to value trade. But I believe that if a company is in business, then they have to be valuable to somebody. Otherwise, they'll die.
Right.
They'll just run out of business.
Yeah. I like your point that it might not be valuable for you, but you might be able to find somebody else that you could gift it to. Okay, so another question that I have is based on your price anchoring and bracketing. So actually, how do you, I know that one of the ways you said to define the amount that you're quoting is based on experience and benchmarking what other companies in the market are also doing. But how do you actually break down the components of, let's say, the 100K or the 200K that you were saying as the low end and the high end options?
Sorry, can you clarify? Are you talking about the cost, the price, or the value?
The price that you're charging to
How
the
do
client.
how do I break down a price in the price bracketing?
Yeah.
So
So how would you recommend that others define this low and high end?
Okay, so a theory that goes hand in hand with price bracketing is called option pricing. So for example, in my bracket, I had 100K to 200K. And in your mind, or if you're preparing a quotation or proposal, you might create 3 different quotations, 100, 150, and 200K, okay? So 100K might include, I don't know, X amount of features, 150K might include more, 200K will be the grand project. So in your mind, you should be able to figure out, okay, with 100K, I can provide this, 150K, I can provide this, 200K, I can provide this. So it's about sort of segmenting the different prices. Does that make sense?
Similarly to that, I remember in the beginning you were talking about the diagnosis, right? And I know that that's one of the most expensive parts of what you're charging to the clients. Can you elaborate a little bit on why that diagnosis phase is so valuable and why you can charge the client so much for it.
Okay. So the diagnosis phase is part of what we charge as strategy, which is somewhat in the pre-production phase. So why diagnosis and strategy is relatively expensive in comparison to everything else we charge is in this phase, we really have to direct our client in the right direction. We have to figure out, give them clarity as to which direction they want to head in. For example, to give a physical example, if a boat wants to head 42 degrees south, but they accidentally go 41 degrees south, they're going to be way off after 2 days of sailing. So essentially, in the diagnosis and strategy phase, we are really nailing down the key objectives and KPIs, specific measurables that we can obtain. Because if you don't have specific measurables like $100,000 in sale or 50,000 likes or views or comments, then you don't know if you've made your money back with this video, if I've made your guarantee. So it's important in this phase because you are essentially telling them or helping them rediscover what it is they're looking for and how this project at the end of the entire engagement can help you. And it's again related to value-based pricing because it's identifying the value. And without diagnosing it, you can't really do that. And you might be tackling the wrong thing. Imagine, back to the doctor example, they give you the wrong medicine because they didn't do a proper diagnosis. Is that going to help? It might make your business worse. Maybe your client doesn't need a video. Maybe what they need is a podcast or a photo. But now you've wasted their money by producing a video that gets swamped out. So it's helping them diagnose correctly what they need.
How do you get good at this diagnosis or strategy part?
If you listen to our previous episode, to get good at anything, you have to practice and you have to fail. I mean, I think in the past few years, we've underpriced a lot of things and we've also done strategy really poorly. We might have misidentified goals, objectives, but again, I think it's about practicing and trying. And sometimes you might just find family or friends who do have business, or not even business, they have like a life goal, and you try to help them develop a strategy, diagnose what their limiting beliefs are, why they want to do this, what's stopping them, their objections. No real good way of getting better aside from practicing and maybe listening to other people do strategy. I think that helps a lot. And there are some templates online that you can look at.
One last question from me. You were talking about the 50 to 250K tour video story. Is that the most that you've ever pushed up a price that your client has originally quoted? What's the most exciting story that you can share?
So 50 to 250K was a 5x jump. And I think in terms of stories that I can share, it's not as exciting because sometimes I'll land a budget just because just the beginning budget was very high. So it might be like 300, 400K, but then the original budget might be 200K. So it sounds like a big jump, 200 to 300. But if you think about it, 50 to 250 is more impressive because I 5x'd it. The most important thing, well, it's hard to say because actually if I'm being honest here, the margins on the 250K project, probably not that high. I remember it wasn't that high. It was much less than what we were previously earning, but we solved a bigger problem. And not just because the number is higher, like 250K, 500K, $500,000 might sound really good, cool, or really like, wow. But financially speaking, it might not be the most profitable because the higher the budget means the higher the spending. The more people you have to hire, the more time you need to spend, the more resources you need to get. So don't get too fixated on high number projects because sometimes a 100K project might earn you more than $1 million project in terms of margins. Any other questions?
I think that's mostly it.
That's mostly it. Would you like to get into a mini sort of client vendor role play scenario so maybe the audience listening can get a better idea as to how they can apply all the different skills that we just talked about?
Sure.
Okay, so let's say I am the vendor, I am the production house, and you are the client. And you ring me up, and I'll say, hey, this is Eugene from EuCan Productions. How can I help you?
Hi, Eugene. I'm Kitty. So I'm representing a professional services agency, and we're looking to have some professional portraits done for our employees in, let's say, 2 weeks' time. And we have about 40 people that we want photos for, expecting a 1 day or a half day, however long it takes, photo shoot process at our office.
Great. Why are you doing this?
Good question. So we previously reached out to another company, and they've been taking photos for us for the past few years. I just joined the firm, and I've noticed that the quality of the photos are not as good as I would hope it to be. The lighting is just not very good, so we're trying to find some alternative options compared to our original vendor.
Right. So the photos you had were previously not that good. How did that impact the company?
From an external perspective, I'm not sure, honestly. But internally, I know that some of the employees were not too happy about it. They had to do a lot of post-production, and photoshopping themselves.
Right. So that probably didn't help so much in terms of your company culture if they took company photos and it was not so good.
Sure, you can say that.
Okay. And where are you showing these photos? What is the purpose of this?
Good question. So the photos we will put onto our internal intranet. So it will be on a portal where, let's say, at least on an email, in our internal system, you'll be able to see each other's faces. And then also, if, for instance, any of our employees go to external events, that will probably be the portrait that is used as well.
Oh, for external events as well?
Probably, yes. And also on our website, because our website is obviously open to public. So if, especially like the leadership, they will be using those photos on the website.
Right. So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's going to be a first impression to a lot of your clients and a lot of external parties.
For specific individuals, yes.
Are those important individuals?
Yes, they're our leadership.
Okay, and they're going to pretty important events?
Yep.
Okay, so it sounds like these photos will really help them stand out as a professional.
You can say that.
So we normally start at around $50,000 on the low end and then maybe $85,000 on the high end, depending on the scope of the project. Is that within your budget?
I think that's a little over our budget.
What is your budget?
We wanted to look for $20K.
$20,000. How much did your previous client charge you?
15.
Right. And you said they were pretty bad.
Yes.
So do you think a $5,000 extra is going to take you to the level you want to be to get the quality that you do want?
Could you break down what you would be able to offer in the price ranges that you proposed?
Oh, 40 awesome portraits. That's what we're offering.
So just one photo per employee?
We're going to get it
What are
right.
we looking at?
We're going to get the photos that you need.
Could you explain a little bit more on what that 50, did you say 50 for the low end?
50 on the low end.
Actually includes? I'm just interested in what we will be getting.
Sure. I mean, it could include our location scale at your office, depending on how your office looks like. And we might set up a backdrop, we might set up a space for the photo shoot, but all that doesn't matter if we can't get you an awesome photo. What I'm saying is, we will go to the depths of the end to sort of get you those photos. How does that sound?
I'm sorry, 50K is just too over our budget.
Then what is your budget?
The most I could push it to would be 30.
$30,000. Okay.
Is there any way we can strike a balance in between?
Yeah. Do you have any other future photo shoots or video shoots coming up that maybe we can help you with?
Yeah, I mean, our company, we hold a Christmas party every year. We might do an event video, or if it's not for these internal events, we sometimes also, in our other offices in other areas, we will have some client events as well. And then maybe for those, we can have some event coverage. Apart from that, actually, we do take employee pictures around once a year. So it's a regular thing because we have lots of people coming in and leaving. So we need to refresh these photos pretty regularly.
Right. Okay. Previously, I mentioned starting at $50,000, but if you can guarantee us, maybe in writing, maybe just verbally, future work together, because basically every client in our database has to fulfill a minimum level of engagement. We don't really do project based. We like to have a long-term relationship with our client. So if you can guarantee us, let's say, $150,000 in projects, $150,000 in projects in the coming year, financial year, doesn't have to be one project, can be multiple projects. We can make this work.
So before I mean, that sounds reasonable, but I think that one concern I would have, as we've never worked together before, is what if, unfortunately, things don't really work out and we don't really work together well on our first time, and I don't want to continue this year long because it is a big commitment considering we've never worked together before, and I'm not sure 100% if you can deliver exactly what we want.
If you're concerned about the value that I can bring to your company in terms of the photos and the production that we can give you, we can take another route. If budget is a real big concern at the moment, I know with the pandemic and whatnot, it might be a little bit difficult. How about this? I can charge you $0 for this photo shoot. But if we do deliver, and your senior management and external parties gives it a big thumbs up, they really enjoy it, they really like it, and it gives the best impression, then you meet us at the price that we were talking about of $50,000 to $85,000. Or just me in the middle, $65,000 if after our project, everyone in your team likes it. And how do you quantify this? We can maybe send out a survey, see what they think, or if simply your senior management goes to an event, shows a photo, and they stand out, then we know we're onto a winner.
I think standing out is a little bit hard to quantify, though.
Okay. How would you quantify it?
The survey idea sounds reasonable.
Yeah. So that way you can get a variety of entries from different colleagues of yours, and you can have different measures. So how does that sound? How would you like to proceed forward?
I'm in between the long-term partnership option and the one we were just discussing on the survey.
What's your objection? What's on your mind?
They're both a little bit out of the budget I was originally prepared to provide for the photo shoot. I'm not sure if my other teammates we'll want to allocate so much for our employee photo shoots that have been in the past 15K.
15K and lots of unhappy people. Am I right? How about this? If you're concerned about that, maybe you can go on and talk with your team and discuss the importance of these photos. If in the end you believe that $15,000 to $20,000 is all you can afford, then maybe I can give you some referrals. But if you want some guaranteed stunning photos and you have the budget, love to help, see how we can work together. And yeah, we can discuss after that.
Sounds good.
All right, perfect.
So we will keep in touch.
So any questions about what we just did?
I think you navigated that pretty well. So for the record, I've never done this with him before on this topic. And I know that he can be very, very persuasive. So I was honestly quite hesitant to do this negotiation with you, but I think it went well.
Yeah, you were playing a little bit of a hardball.
Really? I don't know. I mean, like, company budget is something that is usually the person that you're talking to might not be the person with the decision-making
Yes,
rights.
that's actually an important point that I forgot to bring out. In value-based pricing, it only really works if you're talking to high-level management, C-suite executives, or people that have skin in the game. If you're talking to maybe a middle manager that only has a budget to burn, you can see it was very hard for me to give a value-based pricing. So that's why we went with the long-term partnership deal, because that's probably more feasible for them. Because if you don't know, most companies have a budget that they have to spend every financial quarter. If they don't spend it next year, they don't get the same amount. They decrease it. So that's one way of navigating it. And in terms of value-based pricing, you'll notice that it was very hard to get a number out of the value. What value could you bring, right? It's just, these are just photographs. These are impressions. So that's why we try to create a more quantifiable way. We could have gone deeper, but normally you would want a more measurable value, quantifiable value that you can then take into consideration for your pricing. How did that role play make you feel as the client?
I think you provided quite a few options at first. When you went way over my budget, I was like, okay.
How did that make you feel though when I was way above your budget? What did you think my production house was in terms of positioning?
Well, at least definitely significantly more high end than our previous vendor, which I know is part of the strategy as well, that pricing needs to reflect how you value yourself and where you're positioning on the spectrum.
Exactly, because sometimes you might think, oh, if I price a little bit lower, I'm giving my clients value. I'm giving my clients a deal. No, they might think you're not good enough. If I said something like $10,000, the client might be like, oh
he's
shoot,
even worse.
he's worse than the previous guy. He might not even bring lights.
Yeah.
So pricing low isn't always a good thing. Okay, so that made you feel like we were definitely on the higher end. How did you feel as you were engaging in this process?
I think that maybe for me as a client that doesn't come from a filmmaking background, and maybe you can speak on this if that happens a lot, but I wanted to hear more about what you're actually bringing on the day. And that's a little bit of what I was fixated on, but I could tell that you didn't want to drill into that because you were going on the value-based pricing instead of it's going to be XYZ hours. We're going to bring XYZ amount of equipment and number of people and the details there. But I don't know, maybe you can speak on this, on how clients have felt when you kind of, at least from my perspective, seem to be going around the problem. Maybe around the problem is not the best way to say it, but kind of around the thing I was trying to ask about.
A lot of real clients, even if you tell them the exact camera model that you're using, if you're using a Canon 5D Mark IV, if you're using a big aperture light, they don't care. I can tell you all the fancy equipment names. I can bet at the end of it tomorrow, you're not going to remember the equipment I mentioned, but you will remember that I said I'm going to get you 40 awesome photographs. It's not about the equipment. If it requires a nicer equipment, we'll get nicer equipment to get your shot. It's not about the equipment. It never is, and it never will be, because they're not paying you for your equipment. They're paying you for your creative services, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I think one way that I would have felt a little bit more reassured, and probably I already knew what you were going to say in response, which is why I didn't ask, but was in terms of, can you show me some examples of what you've done in the past that reflects what I'm looking for, so that I feel more reassured that, yes, this guy can actually deliver on what he has. And then, can I just guess what you were going to say? I bet you would say, so how did you find us?
Oh, exactly. I'll be like, how did you find us? Oh, you saw that Microsoft photo shoot?
Yeah, you saw my website.
What did you think? You liked it? Oh, thank you.
That's why I didn't ask you.
We could have gone down that route. But
I didn't want to get roasted.
one of the questions that you asked was, it's very hard to quantify stage presence if they've left a great impression. And you're like, how would you, I think she asked me, how would you quantify that? And as a creative person, you might be like, oh, shoot, how do I quantify that? And trick number one, you just ask them back, how would you quantify it? Because it's about them, it's not about you. And that way you sort of not avoid, but you let them answer the difficult question of quantifying it, because it's their value, not yours. So if you listen back, most of our conversation was just me asking you questions. I barely said anything. I just kept asking you, so why? What do you want? Why did you not like the previous guy? So how much did the previous guy charge? It's about making you answer yourself and gaining clarity. Was there anything else in that role play that stood out to you?
I had something on the tip of my mind. I lost it.
I mean, we went through a lot of things. We did price anchoring. I did price bracketing, a bit of options there as well. And didn't dive too deep into the actual equipment, because it's not about, for the client, it's not about the process, it's about the final deliverables. And I even gave them a few options to pay us, right? From working with us long term to just straight up not getting paid, so we can get that value from you. And to do that, you do have to be really confident about where you are as a creative studio or individual, because if you can't, that might be a problem. But to do this, you do have to be confident about your skill and deliver on it.
I remembered the question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned quantifying the impact, and that actually links back to one of my very early questions on what if it's not a direct impact on sales, like professional pictures, right? It's an impression, but then, for instance, we will use these photos in a pitch deck, and obviously it's hard to say that that photo is what led us to selling $20 million, right? So I think that was also one thing that I would want to ask on how you might be able to navigate, especially if it's a product or service that's very indirectly linked to a revenue figure or sales.
Here's the thing. If a company is paying for a service, any service, they're expecting it to help their business in some way or another. It might not be a sales. It might be branding. It might be company culture. It might be building that company culture. And what happens if you improve company culture? That's not quantifiable. But you know what is? Productivity. They work more productive hours, generate more deliverables in less amount of time. How much is that worth? How much more did they deliver in terms of what serving the company? But also, how many hours did you save in employee salary or just happiness in general? And that might lead to less turnover. So you waste less money on job training employees up and finding new employees and the entire thing. It's very much all linked. It's letting them realize and letting them put a number on how much that's worth, because it definitely is related to a monetary amount. They just don't know it.
Fair enough. And also attracting better talent
Yeah.
in the culture.
Do you agree with my point?
Yeah, I agree.
Because if it doesn't do anything for a company, why would
They do it.
any company do it?
Yeah.
I can't really think of why any company would spend money if it doesn't help with their people, their business generation, their branding, their image, and anything related to the company. It has to always circle back. It's not always just for fun. Even if you're just dining out, claiming expenses for dinner, that's company culture still. You're treating your employees well. They'll remember that. Nice crew meals. Yeah. Do you have any questions about that role play?
I think that's it.
Okay. Any other questions about this episode?
It's all from me.
Okay, cool. I think that's pretty much it for this episode. I think we dived into a lot of different types of strategies, pricing, negotiation, and we even did a role play just to give you guys a little bit of a taster as to what it might sound like. Of course, we didn't really dive too in depth in each of these categories because they are all very, very heavy topics that require lots of reading, lots of practice and exercise. So if you have any sort of any questions for our next episode, anything you want us to talk about, want me to explore, let us know, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.